Whether you're a dad who got roped into recording your daughter's dance recital and now everybody wants a copy, or you're a new video production company and you're trying to launch into the dance recital market, this video is all about teaching you a few simple strategies to filming a dance recital. I'm Lance Lewis, and this is Lance on Location. If you're only going to record the show with a single camera, then make sure you have a really good tripod with a smooth, fluid head. One that you can pan and tilt with smoothly. Because when you make the final video, it's just going to be from the single camera. The other thing you want to make sure you have is a really good zoom controller. The zoom controllers that I use have pressure-sensitive toggle switches on them. So the harder I press it down, the faster the zoom. The less I push it down, the slower the zoom. Now, when you're recording with a single camera, you're going to want to slowly push in as the group comes together and slowly expand out as the group expands. You always want to keep all the dancers in your shot at all times. Now, I like to think of shooting a little bit like driving. When you're driving, if you're starting to get near the shoulder or near the center line, you just gently ease your way back. You would never want to jerk the wheel back because that could cause you to lose control of your car and cause an accident. Well, shooting's a lot the same. So if dancers quickly dance out of your shot, hopefully you're prepared and you don't let that happen, but you don't want to just jerk the camera or zoom out too quickly. Instead, you're just going to slowly pull out and gently adjust your shot. A good tip is to make sure you leave a little bit of extra room on the edges. Number one, so you don't accidentally lose the dancer's arms as they're dancing about, and so that if they expand quickly, you've got a little bit of lead time to prepare for that. In the description of the video, I'll list a couple links to sturdy tripods, good fluid heads, and reliable zoom controllers. If you're able to record with two cameras and two camera operators, then I like to have one camera focus on the same thing it would do if it was doing a single camera shoot, which is what I call the wide to group camera. And again, that camera is slightly pushing in when the group condenses and gently pulling out when the group expands, and it's following them left and right, so on and so forth. The second camera can focus on close-ups or relative close-ups. So let's say you have 8 dancers going across the stage. Now the wide to group camera is going to be pretty wide. So you can take that close-up camera and let's say they're grouped in 3 it looks naturally like there's 3 groups of dancers. The close-up camera would take one group for a measure or two, take the next group for a measure or two, and take the last group for a measure or two. Second camera operator that's doing these relative close-ups has to be aware of the blocking. The blocking might be 4 and a 5. And even more importantly, the blocking can change. So it's important that that second camera operator is aware of those changes and tries to make sure that everybody gets some good close-ups. Now remember, the wide group camera should really be focused on having a 100% usable shots. So in editing, your editor could go to the wide group camera at any time. That's always a usable shot because you can never rely on the close-up camera operator holding still at that particular moment that the wide camera operator might be moving. So the wide camera operator keeps all of their shots smooth and steady, just like driving. The second camera operator has to be aware of what the group is doing when they're shooting their close-ups. So for example, again, we've got the 8 dancers spread out throughout the stage. The close-up camera operator takes these 4, counts a couple measures, everything's looking great, and then switches over to these other 4, and a measure into it, someone over on that side starts a wave effect. Now, a wave effect or a domino style effect is really designed to be seen from the wide to group camera. Why? Because there's something about the people that aren't moving that make the people who are moving more interesting. Think about it. Let's say you're at a ball game and in the stadium, it's a massive stadium, and you see the wave going around the stadium. What makes us look interesting or cool is it's a single wave that goes throughout the whole stadium. But if you take a camera and just follow that wave, it is not as interesting. The close-up camera operator, if they're on that second group and the wave starts down there, they just have to realize that they haven't gotten this second group yet. So they should just stay there. Another thing the close-up camera operator needs to be aware of is blocking. So back to our example where we've got 8 dancers spread out throughout the whole stage in a straight line. You've already shot the 4 over on this side, and you move over to this side, maybe you're a measure into the music, and the dancers suddenly switch positions. So now instead of 4 and 4, maybe you have 3, 2, and 3, and the blocking is different. Or maybe they completely get out of the straight line, form a circle, and start dancing around in a circle. And so the close-up camera operator just has to make a mental note that they really haven't gotten that other side yet. Another strategy I like to use when we're shooting a dance recital with 2 cameras is that the close-up camera operator, when the girls get close enough together, now the close-up camera operator has all of the girls, and we communicate with each other through our comm system. The camera operator would say, "I've got the group." Now the wide to group camera operator knows I don't have to keep pushing in because the close-up camera operator has them all. So the wide to group camera operator starts moving in when he sees the girls coming together. But it turns out the girls get in a really tight group, and so the close-up camera operator says, "I've got the group," then wide to group camera operator just stops. That way, when the girls start to expand, the wide to group camera operator is ready for them to come into frame and can start expanding out. And that's a lot better than the wide to group camera operator being in all the way tight, close-up camera operators in all the way tight, and the girls split out to the sides really fast. And if you're only using 2 cameras, neither of you have it. For the dance recitals that my company covers, generally we use 3 cameras, but only 2 camera operators. So what does the third camera do? Well, first of all, wide to group camera, just like if you're only doing a single camera shoot, that camera's following them as they come in, expanding as they come out. All this while the close-up camera is grabbing groups of the dancers, 3 people here, and wait a couple measures, So what does the third camera do? The third camera for me is really a backup. I love backups because I can't go back to the show and redo it. In most cases I can't, nor do I want to. I want to have a camera that's there just in case something went wrong. Well, what could go wrong? Let's say the wide to group camera was going in and suddenly girls off stage join in. Now, hopefully, if girls are coming in from off stage, you were already aware of that because you saw them leave the stage. But what could happen is the number begins with a small group of girls on the stage and you're thinking, okay, that's all the girls. You start moving in and suddenly another measure of music hits and in come a whole bunch of other dancers. And now with a 2 camera shoot, you would just completely miss it. So the third camera that we use is wide to stage. So we've got wide to stage, wide to group, and relative close-ups or groups of girls. The third camera is an on-man camera and it's set to be as wide as the stage. Now, what about f-stop? You're probably rolling that exposure or that iris dial the entire time. And if you're not, your videos probably aren't going to look that great because the variety of light in a dance recital, and it depends on the theater and how well they can light the stage, but the difference in light from the front of the stage to the back of the stage is going to vary. The difference in light between the left side and the right side might vary. And a lot of times, especially if you're in a middle school theater and some high school theaters, they might not even really have enough lighting to evenly light the stage. So you might have some hot spots. And then if you're in a professional theater, you might find that their lights are just still left over from whatever the last show is that they did, and they haven't refocused their lights. So that can create hot spots and dark spots. And the human eye, when we look at it, we just compensate for it immediately, but your camera won't do that. You have to tell the camera what the exposure is. So although some cameras you can kind of dial in the auto exposure, kind of coaxing it into exposing a little bright or a little bit dark, although you can do that, the way in which a camera figures out how to auto expose has never worked well for me in a theater setting. If you've had luck in a theater setting with auto exposure, leave a comment below, tell me what kind of camera you're using, and tell me the circumstance of how it worked for you and how it didn't work for you. In our case, we don't use auto exposure for a theater setting at all. But the good news is, most of the time, I have found that dance recitals will have a similar front lighting with each number. And so I can preset my f-stop to the number that I know has worked pretty good. And then as I'm controlling the wide to group camera, I know that if I'm rolling my dial all over the place, I know that the camera next to me, which is the wide to stage camera, it might need to be adjusted. So I just reach over with my hand, give it a little adjustment. The other advantage of having another camera already recording and already out there, in addition to covering your shot in case they dance out of the wide to stage camera, the other advantage is that if one of your cameras should malfunction, you can just jump over to that third camera. And I've actually had to do that. It's pretty uncommon that our cameras will malfunction, but a lot of things can happen in a live venue. One of the things that has happened to us is a power cable literally went bad during a shoot. Camera just loses power. Of course, in that moment, you don't even know what's happening. All you do is you just jump over to that extra camera. I like to think of it as an insurance policy. That third camera there gives me just a little bit of extra cushion should something go wrong or should the camera operator miss the shot. So where do you want to set up your cameras? Well, I want to faithfully reproduce what actually happened at the show and maybe even make it look a little bit better. So when I go to a show, where do I sit? If I had my pick of seats, where do I sit? Do I sit way over there or way over there or way up there? No, I probably sit pretty much right in the middle of the theater. I like to have my cameras at the very least centered. Typically you're going to be in the back of the theater. You might be above the sound room, and that's not a horrible place to be unless it's really high. We have one theater that we are up in the third balcony, and that's just the only option in this theater, and it works okay. It's a steep angle. I don't particularly like it, but the people who buy our videos continue to buy them every year, so they must be good enough for the people that are watching them. I would prefer, though, if possible, to be on the ground level, and again, in the back. So sometimes that's behind the last row of seats, but often it involves blocking some seats off. So obviously you have to coordinate this with the dance school who's selling seats to the show. So I have a list based on the theater that I'm in, and I know which seats in which rows have to be blocked off so that we can put our cameras. And personally, I like to have all three cameras right next to each other. And I'm going to tell you why. Now, I realize that might be counterintuitive, especially if you kind of have a movie-making mindset where you know that to make it interesting, you need to have low angles, high angles, side angles, get the camera up close so that you're changing the depth of field, maybe shoot from the backside. And while all that's great and all that's interesting, I find that that just doesn't work for dance recitals. When I say it doesn't work for dance recitals, I'm taking everything into consideration. And that also means the time it takes for me to not only film the recital and the amount of resources, how many camera operators I have there, but also how long it takes to edit the recital. All of this goes into how much I have to charge for the recital, and that will help determine whether or not the school, if they're hiring us, or the parents, if they're buying individual copies, that will determine their pricing, and it'll determine whether or not they're willing to hire us. So for my company, we want to, again, faithfully reproduce what happened, and that just doesn't, even as much as I might want to do it, that doesn't afford us the ability to have all these different camera angles. You know, we've got a 17-foot jib. Wow, that would look great. You know, I can produce some awesome footage with that, and that would look super good, on, especially in a large production number, especially if it's a dramatic number and I sweep over the crowd and very cinematic. Oh, that'd be awesome. But the money's just not there for it. If I have a school that requests something like that, we'll definitely talk about it and see if we can come to terms that are acceptable on both sides. But the reality is, it's just not the world I live in. And we do a lot of dance recitals, and we've never had a concern or complaint about all the cameras being next to each other. And one of the advantages of that is we have a very small footprint. Now, there are three different forces that are pulling slightly in different directions on what the final video should look like. Those three forces are the dance school or dance instructor. This is the person or people who choreograph the number, and they're the ones that decide whether or not they're going to hire you again. Number two is the parents who are buying the video. In most cases, we're selling individual copies to the parents and the families. And it's not only the parents, but it's the kids watching the videos. And the third one is yourself. You know, do you have the mindset that you just need to do something creative? Or is your mindset that you want to just produce a video that is going to sell? In my case, I'm about 60% sales, 40% creative. And now we have people on our team that are 90% creative, and that's great. I can lean on them when I need that. When it comes to being able to offer this product, I want to make sure that I can offer it year after year. And that means I have to make sure I'm making the profit that I need to make it a viable business. Otherwise, I just have an expensive hobby. Now, the three different forces that are pulling on the creative outcome of the video all have different desires of what they want the video to look like. For example, if you're the dance instructor, you choreographed these numbers. And you might have, if it's older girls, and they might not even have to be that much older, especially if it's a competitive team, when one girl over here is doing a certain pose, the choreographer posed the person over here doing something that relates to that. It forms a full picture. And it's only when you see all the girls at one time do you see that whole picture. And that's what the choreographer wants to see, is all of the girls all the time. Now, another force, the parents and the students, well, I think if parents had their wishes, they would see just their child the entire time and a close-up. And I understand that. It makes sense why they would want to see that. But obviously there are other dancers on stage, so you can't just show just them. And then the third force is yourself. And you know, you might be using video as a creative outlet. So when you produce a piece, you want to be proud of it. And I get that. But I just don't view dance recitals as that. So instead what I want to do is I want to try to make everybody happy. And the truth is, what I want is I want to make a video that people will buy season after season, year after year. How do we make it all work together? How can we give them something that everybody's going to be happy with? Well, the different ages of dance, a 4-year-old dance versus a 12-year-old dancing versus a 17-year-old dancing, there's a difference in complexity. And I'm oversimplifying that a little bit, because you can have a competitive dancer who's only 7, who's doing some pretty complex stuff. But if it's a real young group, it might go like this. The curtains come up or the lights come on, and we are on the wide to group camera. And the girls are in a little bit tighter, so that camera slowly starts moving in just to frame them all the way up, giving a little bit room on each edge. And now the close-up camera in the meantime has been getting into position. So a couple measures go by. We've already established all the people that are on stage. We go to the close-up camera, and it's got the 10 girls on this side. Then we go back to the wide to group. A couple measures go by, and we go to the 10 dancers on this side. Then we go back to the wide to the group. Then we go to maybe 3 dancers over here. And the close-up camera operator is just going to kind of work their way through, of course, watching out if they change blocking. It's a very dynamic situation. But we're going to do those close-ups more often for a 4-year-old number. Now let's contrast that to a competitive number that your 16, 17-year-old girls are doing. It starts off, you know, the camera starts out wide, and maybe they're taking up about half the stage, so the wide to group camera's coming in, and then the girls get in a really tight group. The close-up camera operator says over the comm system, "I've got the group." So the wide to group camera stops, close-up camera is following them now, keeping all of them in the shot, and the girls split right into this shot. The edit point works very nice. And they keep expanding so that I'm pulling out with them. Now, they're dancing around the stage, but they're staying fairly wide. So the wide to group camera is going like this. The close-up camera is going to be used now to just flavor the dance. We don't want to stay on a close-up of a group for very long, because the choreographer wants to see how that whole dance looks. And even the girls at that age, the dancers at that age, they do want to see the whole dance as well too, because they know the choreography is based on the whole picture. They don't want to see just them. Now that doesn't mean you can't do it. I think of it's a little bit more like salt and pepper. You don't want to overdo it, but you got to sprinkle a little bit in here and there. Now, it's important as you edit or as you teach your editors to understand the difference between maybe 4-year-olds dancing where they're all going to do the same thing at the same time, and the difference between that and older kids who are dancing who are maybe every single dancer has a different move they're doing at a particular point in time. The older and more complex the dance is in that sense, the more you're going to want to say on that wide group. And as an editor, it's something you want to keep in mind. And one of the biggest problems is, and I like to say it this way, is just because you can doesn't mean you should. So just because you can go to that close-up camera because there's a shot there and it might be a great shot, based on what's happening on the dance, you might not want to go to that close-up. And it's important that you or your editors are aware of that, or you're going to end up producing a video that the people watching don't like. When I first got into video over 20 years ago, a mantra that I heard over and over was that audio is 51% of video. And I can tell you that has proved to be true time and time again. So it's really important that you learn how to capture good audio for your dance recitals. That wasn't really the scope of this video, but I do have 2 other videos that talk directly about that. One is how to capture excellent audio for dance recitals, and the other one is how to get a good line feed from the soundboard. I'll put links for that down in the description, so make sure you check that out. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and follow me on social media, where I give additional tips and tricks on event video production. Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching. I'm Lance Lewis, and this is Lance on Location.